And there's a more horrifying element to that too, because as a clinical psychologist, I've seen the full Freudian nightmare, I can tell you that. And, I've seen families where it's like this, it's like the family members are standing in a circle, let's say, and each of them has their hands around each other's neck, and they're squeezing hard enough to strangle the other person in 20 years. And that's the family. It's like, and if you haven't met a family like that, or well, then you're not paying attention, and there's some reasonable possibility that you're actually in a family like that. So the idea that parents can't dislike their children, it's like, God, how naive can you get? That's just, if you think that, man, I don't even know where you'd start to straighten yourself out. I could never dislike my children. It's like, yeah, well, those are the people who produce the most monstrous children too, I can tell you that. So and then there's this idea that Jung had, which I really love, which is the idea of the shadow. And, it kind of got pop psychology and trendy, sort of among the New Age types too. But one thing I can tell you about Carl Jung is, no matter what else someone might say about him, he is absolutely not New Agey. If you read Carl Jung and you understand him and you're not terrified right to the depths of your soul, you haven't understood a damn thing you've read. And one of the things that Jung said about the shadow, which is the dark side of humanity, the dark side of each individual, was that its roots reached all the way to hell. And he meant something very specific, both metaphysical and practical by that. The metaphysical element was he meant hell, literally and metaphysically, but he also meant the more proximal kinds of hell. And so what he meant was that if you were able to understand your dark side, then you would see in yourself a reflection of the behavior that was present at Auschwitz, for example. And that the reason that people don't take the dark side of themselves seriously at all, and even confront the fact that it exists, is because no one wants to see that reflected within them. And no wonder, like it's absolutely no wonder. Jung also believed that confrontation with the shadow was an inevitable barrier to enlightenment, that there was no, Joseph Campbell, who is a popularizer of Jung to some degree, has become well known for saying, follow your bliss. And Campbell learned virtually everything he knew from Jung. But Jung, that isn't what Jung said at all. He said, pursue what's meaningful and you'll encounter that which you least want to encounter. And that's the dragon, right? That's the dragon that hoards gold, for example. And the dragon is also something that lives inside you. And it's not something that you take the encounter with lightly. There are very old stories about this. There's this Egyptian story about the god Horus, who was the Egyptian savior in some sense. And when he encountered evil, even though he was a god, he lost an eye in the battle. And so that's the famous Egyptian eye, that everyone still knows about. That's the eye of Horus that was torn out by Seth, who's the precursor to Satan. And so it's no joke, that. It's no joke. Back to children. See, I kind of knew this. When I had my kids, I'd already undergone that to some degree and understood what it meant to be a bad person, a terrible person. And one of the things I knew was that manifested itself in families all the time. Tyrannical father, overprotective mother, more rarely overprotective mother, overprotective father, tyrannical mother. It's usually the other way around. And the terrible pathological familial drama that Freud made much of in the early 20th century. I'd seen that in many, many situations. Dismal, brutal, awful. And I've seen parents punish their children. And you can also take a page from Nietzsche if you really want to punish your children, or anyone else if you have someone you're interested in punishing, including yourself. You don't ever punish someone you really want to punish for doing something wrong, because that's actually a bit of a relief to them. That's the theme of Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment. The murderer gets away with it, and it's a relief to him when he gets caught. It's like, no, if you really want to punish someone, you wait till they do something good, and then you punish them. Because that'll teach them. You maximize the hurt that way. You decrease the probability that they'll ever do anything good again. And I'll tell you, man, if you want to have a good relationship with someone, that's one thing you don't do. You open your bloody eyes, and if they do something that you would like them to do again, then you tell them how much you appreciated the fact that happened, and you hope that it replicates, You see, if there's one thing you can take away from tonight's lecture, that's an extraordinarily useful thing to know. Watch, and when people do something that they should do more of, say, look, I saw that you did this specific thing. I saw that it took some effort. here's what it meant, here's how I observed it. It's like, keep that up. And man, if you love someone, you do that to them. That's encouragement. That's such a great thing. So anyways, back to children. So I already knew that I was a pretty decent monster by the time I had kids. And I thought, well, my kid's little, you know, like a baby or 2-year-olds. Like, I'm a horrible monster. And so there's an uneven power problem here. I better not let that child do anything that really makes me angry. You know, now and then you hear about something horrible that happens. When I was in Boston years ago, I read about a woman who plunged her 2-year-old daughter's arms into boiling water. You think, well, how in the world can that happen? It's like, well, you know, she's probably hungover. She probably just lost her job. She's probably desperate in 6 different ways. She probably didn't have any decent disciplinary strategies for children. She probably didn't have anyone helping her. She was bitter and resentful and angry, and the child misbehaved at exactly the wrong moment. And like, you're going to be around your children a lot, and so you might want to have it so that they don't misbehave at exactly the wrong moment. Because all hell can break loose if they can, and I didn't want that to happen. And I knew that it was easy for people to hate their children, even though they mouth the words that they love them all the time. I saw very little evidence of that in many situations. And so one of the things, you know, you have a natural affinity for children, and even more, maybe a more powerful natural affinity for your own children. So that's a good start. But you don't want to set them up as an enemy against you. You don't want to allow them to engage in the kind of hierarchical challenge that makes you irritable and resentful. That's not a good idea. And if the things they do make you dislike them, the probability that they will make other people dislike them is extraordinarily high. And so you can consult your own irritability. And you can say, look, kid, I used to tell my kids this, you know, when they were 3 or 4. I'd say, look, I'm not in a very good mood. And I'm likely to be unreasonable, so it'd be best if you'd go in your room and play for a while. It's like, I like you, man, you're a great kid, but like, get the hell out of here for a while. You know, and they were fine with that. We'd trained them already at that point to be able to go play by themselves in their room, you know, which is something a kid should be able to do anyways. But